conversation that I had with somebody not too long ago, and this was something that I never really thought about when I was going through it, was the go bag. And you kept saying go bag, and I was writing it down. I was circling it. I was like, yes, because when you hit this diagnosis, you got to be at the hospital right now. We got our call at 6 o'clock in an evening, and I want to say that it was a Friday, and it was our daughter's birthday, our oldest daughter's birthday, and we got the call as I was picking up dinner from Red Robin, and my wife said, we need to get to Milwaukee right now. At that point, what do you bring? What do you do? And you pack that bag, and then I said to this other guest that I had, her name is Laura. I said, listen, I said that go bag screwed me many of times because I didn't think about it, because I go to the hospital not thinking that I'm not coming home right away, and you're screwed. You have nothing. And having that go bag, having that being ready is something that you don't prepare for. There's no way to prepare for this. This is one of those, it's like preparing for the SATs. You can't do it, okay? There's going to be things coming at you from all different directions, and there's no way to decide what you study on the most. And when it comes to a diagnosis and taking your child to the hospital, MRIs, CTs, being put to sleep, that red line that you can't cross, that we've all as parents in this community been at the edge of that line and seen them go in, whether it's through the doors of the surgery center or through the doors of the actual operating room. There's a level where we can't go any farther, and we just have to hand over our faith and our child to those surgeons and those doctors and say, now it's your turn, and you have to do it. And we all sign the paperwork. We all sign the paperwork that says that your child may not make it through this. And if they do make it through this, they may suffer these types of side effects. They may come out different than what you remember. They may come out with the tubes and the wires and the hoses all over the place, and it's going to be scary. But you've got to be tough for them. You've got to be strong for them. Well, there's only so much that we can do as human beings, as parents, to be strong, to be tough in that moment. We are just going to have to deal with how we show them our emotions. And for my wife and I, we held a lot of those emotions in front of our daughter, and when she was sleeping or when we would step out of the room, that's when we would break down. We did that to try to maybe shield her a little bit from what was going on. But you also mentioned too that your son, even at a young age, had developed kind of an understanding of which people he knew, when things were going to happen, what he liked, what he didn't like. And these kids, they know so much, and they understand so much more than we give them credit for. And they know the people they like, the procedures that they hate. They know what time of day things are going to happen. And, they're reciting chemo drugs before they're reciting their ABCs, and that's a problem. And that's an issue that we're hoping to fix with this awareness, with this opportunity to share our stories, that this is all real. This is real and raw. These are emotions and things that people don't see. And especially if you shut your social media off and or even if you don't, but you stay behind the scenes and choose not to share everything with the world, you're in control of that. That's what you're in control of. But people don't see all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. They see a happy, smiling kid. They see coming home from treatment, ringing the bell. They see their hair growing back. They see them going to school or whatever, all of these things, but they don't see what happens in the other 23 hours of the day that they're not able to see them on social media or see them in the school or out at they're shopping with you. They're not able to see that. They see everything else. And it's unfortunate because the reality of it is, as much as we don't want to share the bad stuff and the negative stuff with people, that's what needs to be seen, and that's what needs to be heard. And those sights and sounds, I've spoke about it before, and you mentioned it too. Sights and sounds of chemotherapy, sights and the sounds of pediatric cancer will bring the strongest, most incredible person to their knees every single day. This stuff is scary. It is harsh. It is not something that you want to ever be immersed in, and you sure as hell don't want your parent or your child going through it. And doctors, when they're, another thing is that, we talk about what the doctors say and how they kind of approach it, and you're going to be okay. You're going to go through these treatments and you're going to be just fine. And you're going to do all of this and you're going to be just fine. And it's comforting to hear, but at the same time, a lot of people that you would say that to, looking at it, know that that's not the reality, and it's going to be tough and it's going to be hard. And I would rather you not sugarcoat things. I would rather you just tell me how it's going to be, allow me to try to process it, than not tell me the direct answers, the direct truth. I know that, again, it's the misdiagnosis was another topic that you had talked about. Misdiagnosis is one of those things that is common almost 100% of the time with all of these kids with this community. If it's not, with our daughter, it was brain cancer. They diagnosed it as a gastrointestinal problem and constipation for months before we finally figured out what was going on. When they're not willing to go that extra mile, when they're not willing to go that extra step, and you as parents know your children's baselines, you know damn well if there's something not right with your child, if they're not acting right, if they're not sleeping right, eating right, whatever, having issues that they didn't have before, you know those child's baseline. And you as a parent have got to be that big advocate. You have got to be the one, like yourself, that sets up meetings, tells them, this is how it's going to be. This is what we want to know, when we want to know it, how we want to know it, and we want you to be honest with us. I've said in the past that when the CT scan happened, we were told it's a mass. She has a mass. It's a mass on her brain. And why say mass and not tumor? Because mass is a nicer word. Mass isn't as scary as tumor. And mass doesn't mean cancer. It could be benign. It could just be something that needs to be removed and everything will be okay. As soon as we saw the surgeon, he said, it's a tumor. So now we're getting into the scarier words, but he's being more abrupt and more honest with us, and that's what we want to hear. Now he does the surgery, 10-hour surgery for her to be the first surgery, comes out, tells us exactly what it is. Moving forward and really hearing doctors speak to us as doctors, I'm be honest with you, as a momcologist or a dadvocate, however you want to play with the words, we become our child's caregivers 24/7, 365. We do not get to shut it off. We do not get to clock out and go home at the end of the day. We are there 100% of the time. Whatever procedures you're doing, I can promise you we're researching them. Whatever drugs you are giving our children, we're looking into them. Whatever we're doing, whatever you're doing in the room as a nurse, as a PA, as a doctor, we're watching, we're learning. And we should be given the same respect that you would give to a colleague, because we're learning it and we understand it. And giving us that respect and giving us the ability to treat our children in a way that they can be best taken care of when you're not around is only going to benefit the child and benefit this community and benefit the family. So there's no reason to ever sugarcoat things or to dumb down the big words. Just tell us what's going on in real language and let us understand it the best we can, answer our questions. And remember, as parents, you at that moment in time, when your doctor's in the room, when your care team's in the room, when your nurse is in the room, whatever it is, you are their only patient, period. I don't care what appointments they have. I don't care what Zoom calls they have scheduled, what golf games they have scheduled. I don't care. You are their only patient at that moment, and you have to take advantage of that situation to ensure that they always listen to what you're saying, because you will lose that respect and lose that ability to really get what you want if you don't take charge of it. You will earn that respect, and a lot of doctors will give that to you if you take charge. The other thing that I wanted to touch on is I wanted to say that whatever victory your child has going through this treatment, whether it's the end of treatment, whether it's being discharged from the hospital, or graduating to a different chemo, because whatever victory your child has going through this disease is a big victory, and it should be celebrated as a big victory, because every single victory is important, and every single victory is ringing worthy. Every single one. Never ever take a victory and make it seem like it's not, it shouldn't have been achieved, or it's not quite what it should be. No. If they have done something that requires that it is a victory, that it's a happy thing, if their counts went up 1 point, if they didn't need a blood transfusion this week, if they got up and did PT today, if they decided that they were going to eat 3 more macaroni and cheese noodles versus only 1, you celebrate it all as a victory. These kids are going through the absolute worst times in their life. As parents, you're going through it right alongside them, and we just need to celebrate how absolutely incredible these kids are. And it's mainly because what they're going through, they can still do it and smile at you. What we would go through and what we do go through as adults, even if it's not cancer, if it's just the damn man flu, which is real. Okay, guys, it's real. I'm sorry I've exposed it. It's real. If you're going through it, we're babies. We're babies compared to what they're going through, and they still smile. So we just need to celebrate all these victories, give them all the praise that they deserve, the respect that they absolutely demand, because you know what? They're going through what they're going through, and they're teaching us. They're teaching us how to be better people. They're teaching us how to be better humans and to be genuine and innocent and not worry about the stupid stuff that goes on in this world every single day that we concern ourselves with. They are teaching us, and the best thing we can do is just sit back and learn from them.
Oh, definitely. I 100% agree with that. And, I think also going back, the theme of going back, but how you did mention about, celebrating big and small. And I think that that is a beautiful reminder. And I think even one for myself. I think that there's been lots of times that I reflect on the journey. And I think back, for example, when my son had his first nodule resection. And I think after that, because you're so unsure, I feel like, or for myself, I was so unsure of like, well, because you think about ringing the bell, and I think because like from what you see on TV or things that you hear, and again, I think even like when I know about past, histories of like stories that have been shared, it's like you don't see the nitty gritty, you don't hear about you know, the hard stuff. It's like they were diagnosed, they go through their treatment, and oh, they ring the bell, or oh, they're cancer free now. For some families, and so I think that like I remember like how well this doesn't feel right, like this doesn't feel, and I think because I was so I think dependent on like the staff kind of making it a special moment because we were still in the hospital, that I was like, okay, well, this doesn't feel like what I thought it would, or this wasn't like, or because at that time he did know ring the bell, and so I just thought, and I remember inquiring about it and asking about it because I wanted that like so desperately, like for him and for our family, like so, are we going to do? And it was always like, oh, they haven't done that for you. Oh, they didn't do that for you. So I was like, oh, I didn't know, but I think definitely again, like for the length of the journey that we've been on, it definitely is about making our own celebrations, and especially like for example like in the small things, and it's so true, like if you don't need a blood transfusion that week, like that's a celebratory thing. If they have 3 more packets of macaroni and cheese opposed to 1, like that's a great thing. And there's a lot of stuff, and I think even like you know Aiden does labs like twice a week, and over time we hope that that can get spaced out for him, but it's been a thing now too, like even with his dad and I, like we'll get the results almost at the same time, or depending where we're at, we'll just, yes, like his white blood counts went up, and yes, he's not neutropenic, or things like that. So it's little ways that we find things to celebrate things. And so again, I want to just say like that is honestly a great reminder, even specifically more just for myself, to continue to celebrate those little things and continue to be aware of those moments and not miss them. but also too, I wanted to go back because um, one other thing I wanted to share was when you had talked about, giving us that respect as you would maybe even just like a colleague, and the same thing, how you said, what they're looking into, we're looking into. We're looking into the chemo drugs. We're looking into the treatment. We're looking into all of those things. And I remember, even now, like going back, I will reflect on the after visit summaries. I will reflect on the things prior to my son's diagnosis to see like at what point, like, you know, from things being documented and going back. And I remember even after the crazy thing, after my son was diagnosed and obviously knowing his baseline as well and knowing that there was an issue, and that's why I kept pressing and pressing. And so after his diagnosis, we went up to the main floor, and where he was admitted, and then there was like again the whole team of learning doctors that were coming in, and I had this this I'm gonna point it out. It was a male doctor, but he said, I think what your son is going through is just a behavioral problem. And this again was after he was already diagnosed with hepatoblastoma, um, because I had explained about the cry, and I almost lost my crap because I was like, so you're. I told them, I said, you go back home and you tell your wife that if you guys have a child and she's telling you something's wrong and the way that they're crying, and then you tell her it's a behavioral problem and see where that gets you. Because I can tell you right now, obviously he's already been diagnosed, and it's not a behavioral problem. The fact that he mainly only cries out at nighttime, because that's what led him to believe maybe it's just a behavioral issue. And I had let him know. And instead of coming to me with a problem, give me a solution. Tell me, what can I do then to help my son with this so-called behavioral issue? What is going to be something, a tool, a resource, something that I can do to help my son then not cry from pain at night? Like, and so from that point, like he just got kind of quiet. And then I think at that point, like they had already known I was like done. And from what I remember, it was just like pretty much like that brief interaction. And then the whole team like walked out. But I was furious. And I think again, it goes back to giving us that respect because, we dedicate our lives to our children. We dedicate ourselves to then whatever they're going through to learn and read upon like what we can do. What can we be doing better to be the pillars of support in their lives, and what can we do to give them, the best foundation and the best tools? Because, the one thing that I always tell my family and why I try to do everything that I possibly can to finding, these support groups or educating myself more about these things is because I don't have to physically live in this life that my son has to go through, through the treatments and what those side effects are. And even like with chemo, I know that I had mentioned about doing the hearing protectant, but he's already had hearing loss. And so again, it's being best prepared to be able to be that support tool for him until, he's able to, because at this point too, he is nonverbal, but, like later in the future to being able to help him navigate his world. And so I want to be that for him. And so again, it's about dedicating and taking the time to be able to be aware and helping him navigate the world how he will need to and in the best way. So, um, I just think that with all of this going on, all we can do is do our best to be knowledgeable and be as self-aware as we can for our kids. And then
Yeah.
also, I did also want to go back also to the part about how you had mentioned about being like the freak show, and I wanted to speak to that too because I think that that's definitely how it felt. Like it's like you're in this, you know, glass case that just feels like you're and you're just this crazy like thing and to be looked at. And I think that it's so hard. I think that when we get down to the rawness of our children's diagnosis and the things that we go through on a day-to-day basis, and then at the same time, like where, again, it does feel lonely, or sometimes like, yes, these outlets are really, really great, like the podcasts and these support groups, but sometimes it's like you have them for thousands of miles away. And I know even for myself, like right now, I was speaking to a woman in the UK who reached out to me about, her son's diagnosis and trying to get support through that. But it's like where I wish I had somebody right next door to me. I wish I had, someone and with, to be able to like understand those things. And I think that when I share my son's story and they get down to even this last childhood cancer awareness, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to share the pictures of his surgery. Like, I think that I had always kind of covered away from that because of how, extensive like the cut was like on his abdomen and at the end like his abdomen and is just so scarred from resection, from the biliary drain, from the port, from, his transplant. So, I shared those, but then it's just that it's kind of just crazy, like even in that moment where I'm just like, can you, share for like childhood cancer awareness, not even just necessarily those pictures, but even just, like the general, like, childhood cancer awareness, like pictures that you can find online. But it's like, and even my sister, my family, like they'll share it, but it's like they'll get hundreds of like likes or shares on so many different things. But then when it comes to that particular, subject, it's like, nope, like just scroll, 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 like past. And I'm like, um, it's just like where, they get the opportunity to be able to scroll, but it's like for us, we live it every single day. And so for me, I'm just like, I just wish that there was more awareness. I wish that there was more conversations like these. I wish that when we could go into our grocery store in September, that there was childhood cancer awareness. Or, even for myself, I had brought, things to bring awareness. And like I had bought in like these gold like stress balls, and I had, printed out my son's story. But even right there, front and center, it's like there was like nobody coming to read his story or take these stress balls. But, it's just again where it's just the privilege of being able to be, well, I don't want to see that. I don't want to read it, or, things like that where it's just like, I don't know. I think in the moment where I'm at right now, it's like this feeling of desperation of wanting to share the awareness and feel like to be a part of spreading the awareness for all our families.
Yeah, no, the, spreading awareness for this community is very difficult in the sense that we shoulder the weight, right? As parents, as advocates, as organizations, we shoulder the weight when the people that should be doing it are the ones that are creating the funding, the push for all that different type of stuff, and we feel like we're on the outside. And it always comes back to that. And I know that for us, I'm guilty of it. I think a lot of us are guilty of it. That I never knew that September belonged to childhood cancer awareness until we were part of the community. But now that we're well aware that that's what it is, then I want to go full bore every single September and make sure that that that's what it's for, and that these kids deserve the world. I've a sign behind me that says they deserve more than four, and it's like that whole thing needs to be pushed out all over the world every single day, not just in September. September belongs to the kids because it's dedicated as National Childhood Cancer Awareness Month, but every single day for us is Childhood Cancer Awareness Day. Every single day we live it. We don't get to clock out. We don't get to go home. We don't get to live a privileged life of being able to turn around and walk away and say, that story is too sad. Those pictures are too gruesome. I can't believe the amount of comments, the amount of people that we get that say to us, whether it's in person or whether it's through social media, that your videos are they're too graphic. That those pictures are too graphic. Your story is too sad. Well, no shit. Like, honestly, it's our life every single day, and we don't get to turn it off. We didn't choose it, but now we're going to push it because we want more and more people that have decided to walk away and turn it off and shut their eyes and turn their back to turn around and listen to what we're saying, because our kids are the most precious asset that we have in this world. I've said it, and I'll say it a million times. My children are my greatest achievement. I will never achieve anything greater ever in my life than my kids. They are my greatest achievement, and I will do what I can to protect them, and I will do what I can to ensure their safety. But when it comes to pediatric cancer, when it comes to this damn disease, we can't protect them from that. All we can do is fight alongside them and fight for them and fight for the people that will give them what they need in order to survive. I've often mentioned it too, that when you get the list, and if it's anything like what we got, you will get a stack of papers, no less than 10 pieces of paper that are stapled together that talk about the drug that is going to go into your child, or drugs when it comes to a chemo protocol. And about 9 of those 10 are the side effects that they could or may have. And they start off with the most likely to the least likely. And they tell you everything that your child's going to go through and what they're going to go through. And you look at it and you realize if you don't sign this, there's 100% chance of what you know is going to happen. Versus those side effects. They may happen, and it's a possibility. But you're just going to have to live with it. And you're going to have to deal with it if you want to treat them with what they're giving you the options for. Now, at that point, doctors are only using the tools that they have in their toolbox. One of the biggest issues that we have in this community right now is that we don't have a lot of tools in the toolbox to treat these children so that they don't end up losing so much, losing days, losing years, losing weeks and months, losing their hearing, their sight, their fertility, their ability to go to school, their ability to walk and play and be just normal kids. They're losing all of this just for a chance to survive, and a chance to survive with a massive chance. I believe it's 95% chance of having long-term side effects later in life. When you go through all of this as a parent, you don't attain all this information about statistics and about numbers, about the possibility of these things until you're deep, deep into it. And you're forced with making choices as parents that no parent should ever have to make. Whether you are signing whether you're signing on the line to allow the surgery to happen or to start chemotherapy, or you are signing a DNR, God forbid, you are signing things that you should never have to be a part of as a parent, but you're doing it in the best interest of your child and their life and their quality of life, and you're doing everything you can to make that happen. And a lot of people don't look at it like that, and that's an issue. And the same thing with doctors that come in and make asinine comments, or nurses that come in and make asinine comments. You also have to make sure that you're picking the team that you want for your kid. And I will tell you, and I've said it on numerous podcasts and things like that, that I had at least one doctor and one nurse that were never allowed in our daughter's room ever again because of their attitude. And attitude is a big thing when you have a child that is in the hospital, away from home, away from school, away from their friends, away from their other parent. Because, you can't always have both parents in the hospital at the same time, or if you're a single parent, when they're away from everything that they know, and they're scared and in the hospital, your attitude is everything. To come in with a crappy attitude because you had a bad day, or because you had an argument with your spouse, or because somebody cut you off in traffic, and you bring it to the hospital, not okay. It's not good. And like I said, at least 2 people were no longer allowed to treat my daughter ever. They were not allowed in the room. They were not allowed to be part of her case. And I did it because I was doing everything as a father in the capacity that I had to ensure that she was happy in a not so happy place. And I didn't need any outside interference coming in and screwing that up and throwing an audible when she's already done with the situation, just wants to go home, just doesn't want to be a part of it anymore. So,
Oh yeah.
I, so
No, definitely with that. I do want to speak to that too, because I think, especially if there's, anybody that's listening that has just recently had their kiddo diagnosed, it's that you have to get used to being uncomfortable. Like, you have to be in that space to know that if maybe before you were not confrontational person, or somebody would take it as confrontation, it's like these are the times that they're going to challenge you the most. Um, Even for myself, I think that, I was pretty easygoing before all of this, and maybe a lot of things I would have brushed off, but definitely, as you said, like, we still have a job to do, and our job is to make our children as happy and comfortable as they can. And I have had to do that many times. Um, I have had to say, this person is not allowed to interact with my child anymore. And especially like you said, like it's not acceptable, I think, especially for the profession that they're already in, and then the patients that they're dealing with. They're already going through a lot, and they don't need to feel uncomfortable. They don't need to feel like they're a burden. They don't need to feel anything other than they're there to help and support. Um, so I definitely understand that. And there's been a lot of times, both in Oregon and in California, that I had to make that point very clear.
mhm. Yeah, it's unfortunate that we have to take that stance, because at that point we should be spending 100% of our time focusing on our kids, 100% of our time focusing on their treatment and their care, and just getting the information that we need to ensure that we're making all the best decisions for them, not worrying about whether or not we have to remove somebody from the equation. But it's an unfortunate, just an unfortunate side effect of the situation. I know we all have bad days. I know we all have bad moments or bad mornings, whatever. But if anything, especially in this profession, in this career where you've chosen to work with children, you've got to find a way to differentiate that from your daily life. You cannot bring that to work. These kids depend on you. These parents depend on you to ensure that you give them the best care and that the parents get the best information so that we can move forward in making all the right choices. And if that's not something that you can do, if that's not something that you can provide, well, then I'd suggest a career change. And it's a shame, because I know there's a lot of, from the people that I have spoken to and people that I've interviewed that are going into this profession because of the diagnosis and or because of their personal connection. They're going into it for the right reasons, and they're going into it, and I believe will be the most beneficial assets to this community because they have a personal connection where they can relate to families and children. But if you've gone into this and then realized that it's just too much for you, and then just do something else, because this is not a time that I've said it before, and I think it's just a common knowledge that you don't mess with a cancer mom, and you sure as hell don't push around a cancer dad. And what we're going through every single day and what we live with, and we, I think, compose ourselves pretty damn well for the situation that we're in. But at the same time, if you want to unleash what we're holding in every single day, our anger at the situation, our anger at the lack of protocols or lack of options for our children, the anger at the lack of funding from our government, whatever. If you want to take all of that, roll it into one, and then you want to unleash that, let it out. I'm sorry for your day, because we're going to ruin it. It is what it is. I mean, we, like I said a million times, we don't get to clock out and go home every day. We're here 365 days a year, 366 on a leap year. We're here. We don't get to walk away. We don't get to go home, have a cup of coffee, have a glass of wine, and say, that day sucked. Hope the next one's better. We are going to be in it every single day. So you just have to find a way. Bedside manner is a huge thing. I know that it can be difficult, but you really have got to focus on that. So my advice always to parents is you get to pick your team 100%. You get to choose the people that are around your child. You get to choose the doctors, the nurses, the child life specialists, the PAs, whatever. Yes, and we were also in a teaching hospital, so you always had students coming in, and they were always super respectful. Actually, I think I love the students more sometimes than the full-time staff, because they would come in, they would say, hi, how are you doing? I'm a student. Is it okay if I examine do you know what I mean? I loved all of them. They were always fantastic. And we never had an issue with any of them. Um, but that's the next generation. But they are also treating the next generation. And our kids need to be treated with that respect, because they're the ones that are going to turn around and want to do these jobs later on in life. So many of these kids, so many of them, as they get older, choose to take a life into the medical profession or the research or the clinical sciences profession. And they need to have that. They don't need to go in and say, we need to make it better because everybody I had that dealt with me sucked. They need to go into it saying, I want to make it better because I want kids to have a better shot than I did, or I want them to have better treatment options than I did. That's what we want. We're treating the next generation right now, and they need to be treated like that, because they are the future that we will not have if we don't give them the respect, but also take care of them in a better way. That's my advice is always, you choose that team. You make sure they're the right ones. You never back away. You never stop. You never don't ask a question. If you think it's something important, even if it's something trivial, like, you know what, there's only 3 vomit bags in this room today. Why aren't there 10? Ask the question. You are the only patient at that moment. You make those requests. You make those recommendations. Bring up your research to them and ask a million questions. To be honest with you, 9 times out of 10 and 99 doctors out of 100 are going to respect you more because you did your research and you're asking the questions that a lot of people are afraid to ask. That's my advice always when it comes to that situation.
No, definitely. I 100% agree with that. And I also wanted to circle back to, because I know that we have talked about, supports in different ways, like supports from family, supports from friends. Um, but also, I mean, I feel like, again, because we've still been through our journey, I feel like there hasn't been like the, tail end of things, but um, I think that it's also been a little bit discouraging between some of the myths of the breaks of the treatment that we've had, the supports from, even if it's about like hearing tests or um, different follow-ups from after, kiddos are off treatment. I feel like there's been such a lack of supports, or also not being followed up with enough. Um, and I think that that's also been like a really hard piece for me to kind of navigate lately, especially, for example, my son hasn't had a updated like hearing test, but I also feel like when I bring it up, it's kind of just brushed off, even though I feel like in all aspects that chemo can affect children, that there should be more of these supports or more of these follow-ups, to really get, one, the baseline, but then two, to support them in these side effects that a lot of them are permanent. So I don't know if like you've spoken with like other families too that have had that expression of that frustration from not feeling like, even after chemo has done these harsh effects on our kids, that there's still also not that connection of fully, I feel like, supporting the families and the children, of ensuring that, okay, well, if chemo, for example, is targeting the kidneys, like what are we doing to help with that? Or if, you know, tons of hospitalization has made them delayed, like how are we bringing them up on that and ensuring that it's like part of their plan. Or even for myself, like maybe it's just more towards the facility that I'm with, but I just wish that there was more support in between, either kids that are coming off of treatment from chemo or that are like in the middle ground, like how my son is.
Yeah, I think that I've got actually it's kind of surprising to me, to be honest with you, because I know that, for our account, we were in very, very good with the social worker that we had at our hospital in Green Bay. And I'm still in touch with her actually all the time because we do things with the hospital. But she's always been very good at providing the information, whether it be for support, whether it be for counseling, all of that type of stuff, and the options and resources that are available to me. But also, I reach out all the time to ask for options and resources for other people, even if they're not in this state, because it's something that she has access to. And I'm actually kind of surprised a lot of the time that I will get people that will reach out to me and ask for support, whether it's support group for a certain type of cancer that maybe I don't have connection to, but I can, put you in the right direction, or support for maybe finances or things like that, and or aftercare when it comes to, the hearing or fertility and things like that. Um, and I will always, one of my first questions will always be, well, have you spoken to your social worker? And a lot of the responses are, I have, but I haven't heard anything, or I have, but they didn't have any information that they could give me. And I'm blown away because I don't know if I just got lucky, or maybe that I have somebody that I can reach out to and she's always amazing at getting me resources that I need or pointing me in the right direction. Or is this a common kind of epidemic in this community, if not the world, where the resources just aren't there for the people that need them the most, and you have to dig so hard to find those resources. And if that truly is the case, that it's not as prevalent that people can get the resources and the help and the uh, whether it's financial assistance or therapy or mentorship or whatever, and they can't get those resources through their own personal connections at the hospital or social workers or support groups. What are we missing? And why are we not creating that type of environment for people? Because the support doesn't stop because the bell rang. The support doesn't stop because your child passes away. I have said millions of times, I believe that's when the support is needed the most, is after those moments. Once the NED scans or the no evidence of disease or cancer-free scans, a 5-year scan, they rang the bell, or if your child passes, I think that's when the support is the most needed, because that point, now you're trying to rebuild. You're trying to rebuild your life. You're trying to rebuild your child's future. And how is that going to look if they have either permanent or even temporary, but hearing loss or vision loss or loss of fertility, and you have to have that conversation with them, loss of cognitive abilities or speech therapy, and physical therapy with physical limitations that happen due to the treatment. How do you have those conversations if you don't have the support? And I hear it all the time, and it's always kind of blown my mind that stuff is just not so at the ready. And so, because when you go into treatment, when you go into that hospital, if you walk out with a file cabinet full of information about everything under the sun for being diagnosed, from Make-A-Wish to mental therapy, you need therapy because this is all such a mental mind screw on you, or you have trips and things like that you can make people happy, or you can, how do you, there's so much information given to you in the beginning, but what about once those machines are turned off? What about once you ring that bell? What about once you are going to start looking to rebuild your life? Where's the support then? To me, I've always been really surprised that support system is lacking in so many areas, and that's another avenue that I wish that I could fix, but it's definitely a problem. And I think if you have the abilities to give people those resources, and you know how to make those resources happen, please do. Please do.
Yeah, no, and I love that you had that experience and that those connections have been made and the relationship that you have with your social worker were built. And I think that even for myself, I was generally surprised, at kind of just the lack of resources and follow up. And because I will say, being in between two states. So when my son was first diagnosed, it was in Oregon, and at Dornbecker's Children's Hospital. And then from there, I didn't even really have contact with our social worker at all. It wasn't until I was really frustrated because I remember prior to us leaving to San Francisco, um, I was very frustrated with the oncologist, and he had wanted to uh, use the route of going through one chemo that I then wanted a second opinion on. And it's obvious for me, I feel like it's a red flag if a doctor is not supportive of that they already find it insulting because our oncologist was just like, he's not the best, and nobody knows anything about this, and he was just very defensive. And so at that point, like, I just kind of already had like lost trust through that oncologist for a while. And I remember I was gonna tell him something that day, and then the social worker pops in, and I had talked to her about what I was going to say to the oncologist when he came in, and so she then tried to say, well, Bianca would really like to share, and I said, I'm sorry, I've hardly talked to you. I don't need you to speak for me. I have this conversation on my own. I don't need you to feel like you're coming in and like rescuing, you know, this mission. I can speak for myself. And so at that point she kind of just stood in the corner, but it's like I didn't know how she even felt comfortable enough to coming in and speaking on something she had no history or tie behind because she wasn't there for us. Then when I went to San Francisco, we were paired with a GI site for transplant social worker, and at that point, she had only been there for like a couple months. So it was really difficult again to feel like we had no support. We didn't have support in Oregon, and then it felt like we didn't have support in California. And so there came to a time again where it was after transplant, and she didn't even come check on us, I remember. And I remember we had asked specifically if a social worker could come speak with us, and nobody had came. And so time had passed, and I remember I had asked her for like one resource. I think it was for like angel flights because we had thought that there was going to be a time after his transplant that we would have been able to go back to Oregon. And I remember I was we were just so like emotionally like drained from everything that was going on with my son's infections and all the complications. And I told her, can you please look into this resource for me? And I had even called, and they had said that the social worker needed to fill out a form. And so in that time, she's like, yeah, no problem. We do it all the time. Well, she then emailed me the form to do it myself and was like, "Oh, here's all this stuff, for you to do." Even though I had called Angel Flights and got all the information prior to even making contact with her. And so at that point, I was like, "You know what? Like, I don't want to work with this person anymore." And I think that, from her being newer and they're just like, "What's going on?" So I remember she came into I was kind of upset because I felt like I was blindsided by it because we went in for one of the appointments, and the nurse was just kind of like, you could tell she was making the appointment go longer than what it needed to. And I'm like, can we go now? And so she's like, oh, wait, well, just hold on because, your social worker is going to come in and talk to you. And I'm like, I didn't want to talk to her. Like, there's nothing to talk about right now. And so she came in and she apologized, and she's like, I hear that you didn't want to work with me anymore. And, can I, why is that? And I said, we're already going through a lot, and the fact is that I don't really ever come to you to ask for help or support. I said, because at that point, you know, there's a lot of things that I'm tech savvy. I'm able to really navigate like a lot of things when it comes to forms and such. So, you know, the fact that I was like, it was something that I called and they said your social worker has to do, and I explained to you about that, and you said, oh, we do it all the time, no problem. And then you emailed me back just for something to do myself. You know, there's a lot of things that, you know, again, we're already in the midst of. And also, when I had asked her for other supports, it was such a weird area for us to be in because she's like, well, you're not a California resident, so we can't help you. And also, when I would, then she was like, well, try contacting Oregon for resources. And mind you, I wasn't working, my spouse wasn't working. Parking at the hospital was $35 a day. Um, and also, parking at the hotel was $16 a day. And mind you, we've been there for like almost a year in its entirety. Like, so when we were asking for supports and resources, then when she told us to call back to Oregon, Oregon was also the same thing. Well, you're not in Oregon, so we can't help you. So it was always just like I felt like we were just being tossed around. And then when we got back here, just a couple months ago, I had reached out to the social worker, but then we were told that because Aiden wasn't technically in active treatment, that pretty much we were just like with this social worker that just holds cases.
Mhm.
So, like looking for resources is like pretty much slim to none unless we're doing it actively on our own. So that's where it's just like even dealing with between two different states and still having like a crummy experience. I'm just like, you know, I wish that there was again more of those supports for families, and I can only imagine what some of the families are going through or their frustrations. And one thing I even pointed out and shared too is that, you know, even for myself, that I'm very vocal and I'm very tech savvy, and but there's also a huge population, um, you know, that doesn't speak English, or that they're a single mom and working, you know, and have other kids to tend to, that maybe that they can't vocalize those things, or they fall through the cracks. And even for that, I had brought that up, you know, to the social worker at the time, was like, you know, I'm able to vocalize, but what about the people that speak a different language? Like, how are you connecting with them? They're like, well, that's a good point. And, you know, but it's just like, it's so, I think, where they rely on us to continue to put up like even just another fight, you know, another fight that we're already going through alongside with our kids, and then to say, well, you know, you reach me, and then fight for like what you need from me. So that's like
Mhm.
where it feels so difficult to be in this space.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right. And like I said, there's so many people that reach out that are looking for resources that, for whatever reason, it's so incredibly difficult to find. And you're right that if they don't have, you know, the ability or the understanding to really, you know, dig through all I mean, the reality is that the resources are out there, right? They're available, but you have to do the digging to find them. They're not just going to come to you and come sending cash. They're you have to go and find them, and they're not. So a lot of them are not easy to find, and that's where, you know, a good social worker, a good point of contact, it really can put you in a position to be where you need to be. And you know, like I said, I guess we also had, you know, another social worker that we worked with when we were in Milwaukee, that helped us out a few times when we had to do hotel stays before our daughter's stem cell transplant, and they were able to help us with that. But it's having, you know, having those good relationships. I realized too that it's not everywhere. And I don't know if it's true to certain states, if it's true to just certain areas. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there is a disparity when it comes to support for everybody, um, going through this, and the support should really be the same. You know, there shouldn't be any lack of options for if you're going to have to stay at a hospital and you got to pay an absorbent amount of money to park your car there. There should be ways that can be taken care of. If you've got to stay in a hotel, there should be ways that can be taken care of, and there are. But you have to find it. You have to search it out. You have to do your research when you're spending all of your time with your kid. And to be honest with you, it's almost like a collection agency, right? Collection agencies call you, and they just expect that you're going to pay it because you'll never be able to figure it out. And then you eventually do because you just want it to go away. And I honestly think that support groups, not because they're doing it intentionally, but it's not, the money's out there. The money is there. The funds are set aside to help you with parking or with hotel stays or with travel and transportation and things like that. But I also think that it can be very prohibitive to the point where you just give up and find a way to pay for it yourself without ever worrying about it because the process is so prohibitive to get it taken care of. And it really is a shame. And I hope that moving forward, they're through social workers, through the Hope Portal. The Hope Portal is something that is really awesome, has a lot of great resources. Through events like CureFest, where you can meet a lot of people and you can see a lot of organizations that are doing these types of things. There's a lot of resources out there, but once again, you do have to find them, and it's difficult. But I hope that we can get to a point where those resources become more readily available. And through our own organization, I try to make resources readily available for people and point them in the right directions. But again, I'm one person, and it's one person that isn't sitting at a desk as a social worker and has those resources in a Rolodex, and I'm just dating myself, but they're there and they're ready to go. And that kind of stuff should be readily available to everybody that is going through this 100%. So hopefully we can begin to move in a different direction and get that type of stuff out there, because it's very, very important, because we as parents, we as advocates, we as adults going through this with our kids, we are every day putting a candle at both ends. We're putting a lot of stuff on our plate, whatever cliche you want to use. We're out of resources up here. We're out of resources in our mind. We need you to help to fill in that gap, because we just simply don't have the time to be doing all this, digging around, for an extra $50 from an organization to help us park. We need to have you be taking care of that. So hopefully that starts to get better. Hopefully we start to ensure that hopefully somebody hears this and says, maybe we need to start something. Maybe we need to make it easier. And that's my hope. That's my hope, is that we make a difference with one sentence, one word, one quote, and someone takes it and runs with it and makes a big difference in the future. So hopefully the information that we're both saying and that we're as our both positives and negatives of going through a diagnosis like this, you take those and you run with it. But also I hope that it gives a parent that is just hearing those words, that is just, signing those papers, that is sitting in a room waiting for a surgery to be over, that you're taking all of this information and you're utilizing it and finding ways to make your stay, your trip, your journey, your freak show, your shit show, is something that my wife also says. You're making that easier because you're using this information that we didn't have when we started.
No, definitely. And I, appreciate all resources and all platforms that, are out there for families like ours. I think that it's really amazing. I mean, even like, again, this podcast, to be able to share all of these resources, these conversations, because I know for myself, when my son was first diagnosed, and even now, like, I dig as much as I can to seek answers and have any sense of feeling like, okay, there's like a family like mine, or that has been through things like mine, because I think just trying to find solace in knowing that I'm not alone. I'm not alone. Obviously, kiddos before mine have paved ways, for these treatment options and for these networks. There's been that foundation that's been laid for families, like mine and after ours. And so, I think that it's a really amazing thing. And I know that there's some, like I was saying for myself, that I have just held on to these stories and things that have really replenished my hope and my faith and my strength. And just allow me to feel hopeful for like another day and another time, and just even again knowing how resilient our kids are. I mean, they're so resilient in the things that they've been put through, and yet they still smile. They still smile and they still go. And um it's really hard to be in this space, but again, where you find the silver lining, you find the beauty in the hard things and in the painful things.
Right. No, you absolutely do. And you have to dig and search, and sometimes it's really hard, but you do have to find the silver linings in everything that you do in life. But this particular situation, when you're put in a position of really not knowing what tomorrow's going to bring, and really not knowing why, and not having information, like our common questions in life to solving a problem, one of the first things you want to know is why. There is no why when it comes to pediatric cancer. There's no understanding as to why it happens, or why it happened to you or your child or your family. And that's part of the that's something that you have to really grasp with, because it really goes against everything as an adult. That you finding out the why is one of the easiest ways to find out the answer to the problem. And so moving forward, I want to continue to be able to spread awareness, and I want to be able to continue to spread stories, because when I tell JC's story, the first thing people do when they really find out in the beginning is they apologize. I'm so sorry that, we didn't mean to bring it up, or, when it's like, I don't want you to apologize. Like, I don't ever want that. I love talking about her. I love talking about how beautiful she was, and how incredible her spirit was, and her laugh and her smile, and what she did every single day prior to her diagnosis, and how she handled it. I want I want to share her story. So I think that I'm like most parents. When Don't ever be afraid to ask us about our children, even if they're not with us anymore. Don't be afraid to ask us, because I think that most of us, if not all of us, want to share our children's stories. And sharing our stories means that their name gets out there, not for recognition, not for accolades, but because that means that that story could help somebody else moving forward, somebody else that will be diagnosed. There are 47 children every single day, and that number has gone up in the past 4 years. It's not going down. So there are families that you can help with your story. And it's because when you become relatable to somebody else going through it, they look at it, see how you handled it. They go, you know what, that makes sense, or maybe that doesn't make sense. And it gives them a guideline. It gives them a roadmap that we didn't have. So utilize that opportunity. Tell your story, tell it often, and ask us about ours anytime you want to, because I'm always glad to share mine. And that's why I wanted to create this podcast, was not only to share my own story and our family's story and my daughter's story, but now to allow others to share their stories, organizations to share their missions, doctors to share their missions and their passion for why they got into it. That's why I did it, and I'm so happy to be able to continue to do this.
No, and thank you again. I really appreciate, everything you're doing, and just again for being able to have me share Aiden's story. Um, it was incredibly important for me to be able to try to spread his story. And again, for just uh, even a lot more, I feel like, towards the families that are just now having their kids being diagnosed, because I remember the frantic state that I was in, and wanting to then find everything and anything related to pediatric cancer. Um, and I think that as time goes on, I see more and more and more how important it is. I mean, it was important then, but the importance to me has just grown so much more over time, and knowing that, there is a community and there are supports, and um, being able to express ourselves, and being able to share our children's story and our family story just means so much. So thank you for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate it. And again, this was something that was like a first time thing for me. Um, but it's been a really incredible experience to be able to do this and be able to talk with another parent that has had their family affected by childhood cancer. So Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It has been 100% my honor and pleasure to have you on here to hear about Aiden, his story, his fight, and his incredible will to beat this thing and to continue to move forward. I will end with saying this, that I have brought up in the past that there are millions and millions of books about how to raise a kid, and about 99% of those are written by people that don't have kids. And the difference is this podcast and everything we do with our organization, or just with social media and just with being a parent, is being done from a position of being in this every single day and being behind the scenes and seeing it 100%. We've lived it. We're still living it. We'll never stop living it. So this is what gives us an edge on being able to just really talk about it and spread awareness, is that we understand it. And talking to other parents is incredibly important to me because, again, I learn from you, you learn from me, and it's a way to move forward. And whether your child is still fighting or whether your child is past, in our position, you can take what we talked about, and you may even remember or things that you didn't think about before, or they make sense, or maybe they don't make sense, or you agree or disagree. And that's okay. I love having these conversations. I am so honored to have had you on today and to be able to share your story. And I'm so excited to hear about Aiden just taking over the world.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. So I will go ahead and end this episode by just saying it is incredibly important that we always share our stories. It is incredibly important that we always are open and honest with everybody. To the doctors and the medical staff, you chose that life. You chose that job. Just remember that every time that you walk into a room, because these kids, these parents, these families, they depend on you to give them the information they need to make the best choices, but also to put them at ease and not to put them in a state of fear, which the children and the parents are already in. So that's what I will say to you. And also, I like to say this on every episode. If you know or you've ever met a child life specialist, go give them a hug. And even if you don't know one, give them a hug anyway, because they're most incredible people on this planet. And I love every one of them. So that is my episode for today. Bianca, thank you so much for being with me. Aiden, keep kicking ass, man. I know I can't wait to see what you do. But for that, I will say thank you so much, and we will see everybody else next week.